Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to everybody who's joining us today. I'm Candace Kuby, and I'm so excited to be co-hosting this webinar series titled Doing Academia Differently in Conversation with Neuroatypicality. This webinar series follows on from the previous webinar series on post-philosophies and the doing of inquiry. The current webinar is a collaboration between Geert van Hove from Ghent University, Viv Bozalek from the University of the Western Cape, and myself at the University of Missouri. Nikki Romano is also here today on the screen. Nikki serves as a tremendous help and support to make sure the webinar series happens, helps us with all the logistical aspects of the webinar series, and as well as the artist who shared her talents on the promotional materials and on the website. This free webinar series has a total of 10 sessions. We meet monthly on the topic of doing academia differently through conversations with neuroatypicality. Each session involves one or two international guests who have had some experience with neuroatypicality in the context of higher education. The webinar series is made possible by a research collaborative partnership between the University of Missouri System in the United States, the University of Ghent in Belgium, and the University of the Western Cape, or UWC, in Cape Town, South Africa. The partnership between University of Missouri and UWC started in 1986. UWC and the University of Ghent have had a partnership for more than 20 years. Thus, this tri-continental partnership is a trilateral agreement that was set up to promote partnerships between our three institutions during a time of travel restrictions due to the global pandemic. The funds were provided to support virtual research and teaching collaborations between faculty members at our three institutions. We are so very grateful for our university's longtime collaborations and specifically the support of this webinar series. These webinars are also available on YouTube. You can find them by visiting the webinar website, and there'll be a link there so that you can find the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well to receive updates as new ones are posted. Also on YouTube, you can select an option for closed captioning to see the written transcript of the webinar. We have updated our website with the exact times for each webinar in order to take into account daylight savings times and how that affects different contexts across the world at different times. So please check the time posted next to each webinar on our website series, as well as the unique Zoom link that's available for each webinar. So today I'm so excited to introduce our two panelists. I'll introduce them and then maybe they each want to unmute and just say a brief hello. We have Karen Lazar and Denise Newfield joining us today. So Karen and Denise, do you want to say a quick hello to those who are with us today?
Hello, everybody. Greetings.
And Karen, you'll need to unmute.
Hi, everybody. So great to see you here, and thank you for having me. Sometimes my reflexes are a bit slower than others when it comes to dexterity, but I get there.
Well, thank you both, Denise and Karen, for being with us today. We'll do a more complete introduction of you both here in a few minutes. I'd like to turn it over to Viv now to do some introductions of our of Nikki and then of our co-hosts.
Thank you, Candace. I'm delighted to say that Nikki is now a postgraduate, PhD graduate, a postgraduate from the University of the Western Cape and Utrecht University, where she successfully defended her thesis a couple of weeks ago. And Nikki's also a lecturer in art history at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. She's an artist and an art educator with lots of experience in teaching in a variety of sectors. Nikki's been providing technical support and she will do so on the webinar platform today. And she's going to be assisting us in moderating the question and answer discussions, which we'll have at the end of the webinar. And also just to acknowledge Nikki's artworks, which we've used for this series. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Viv. Now to introduce our three co-hosts. Candace Kuby is a professor of learning, teaching, and curriculum at the University of Missouri. Associate Provost for Faculty Success and the Director of Qualitative Inquiry. Dr. Kuby's research interests are the coming to be of literacies when young children work with artistic and digital tools, and approaches to and pedagogies of qualitative inquiry when thinking with post-structuralism and post-human philosophies. She is the co-author of several books, including Speculative Pedagogies of Qualitative Inquiry, and her scholarship appears in journals including Qualitative Inquiry, the International Journal of Qualitative Studies in Education, the Journal of Early Childhood Literacy, and the Journal of Literacy Research. Geert van Hove is a professor in disability studies at Ghent University. The course of disability studies is offered to master students in educational sciences, master in gender and diversity, and the master after master in global health. Vivienne Bozalek is an emerita professor in women and gender studies at the University of the Western Cape, an honorary professor in the Center for Higher Education Research, Teaching and Learning at Rhodes University. She holds a PhD from Utrecht University, and her research interests and publications include the political ethics of care and social justice, post-humanism and feminist new materialisms, post-qualitative and participatory methodologies. Her most recent co-edited books include Post-Human and Political Ethics for Reconfiguring Higher Education and Higher Education Hauntologies, Living with Ghosts for a Justice to Come. Over to you, Candace.
Thanks, Nikki. So as you might notice, we are using the Zoom webinar platform today for this session. The host and the panelists have access to video and audio right now, but as we move into our question and answer portion of the webinar, we will give all attendees the option of being able to join us on video and with audio. So you'll get a prompt or an invite a little bit later in the session. And again, you're welcome to accept that, or you can stay as you are now without video and audio functions. We will, though, also have the opportunity for those who wish to enter a question into our Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You can type your question there, and one of us will voice that for you during the question and answer portion. So the structure of the webinar today is as follows. Denise and Kieran will be in conversation with each other, and then we will open up a space for the question and answer portion. We hope to have a good bit of time at the end for that. And you're welcome to jot down questions as we go so you don't forget them, or you can go ahead and type them in the Q&A box anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll be sure to raise those a little bit later. So Viv, I think that you're going to do some introductions of Denise and Kieran for us now.
Thank you, Candace. Yeah, we're delighted to have the two of you, and I know, knowing Denise, how well the two of you have prepared this session, so I'm really, really looking forward to it. Just to introduce you both, Denise Newfield is a retired professor of English and education at Wits University, South Africa, where she's worked for many years in pre-service and graduate teacher education. She holds a PhD from the University of London entitled Transmodal Semiosis in Classrooms, Case Studies from South Africa. And she remains research active in a range of cutting-edge educational projects and supervises graduate theses that concern educational change. Her research interests and publications pertain to the fields of literacy and literature, multimodality, multiliteracies, post-humanism, post-philosophies, curricular, pedagogic and research transformation, decolonization, and neuroatypicality. She was the principal investigator of a poetry research project in the field of Indigenous knowledge systems, and she's interested in how insights from neuroatypicality can assist us in doing academia differently. Recent publications include a Tebua ontology, Then and Now, Reconceptualizing Literacy Practices, and Tebua and the Pedagogy of Social Justice, Diffracting Multimodality through Post-Humanism, as well as Touching Matters, Effective Entanglements in Corona Time. Dr. Karen Lazar is a writing coach, disability activist, and lecturer in English and professional literacies at several actual and virtual tertiary campuses. She was educated at Wits University in Johannesburg, BA to PhD in English, and lives in Johannesburg. Her PhD and some of her academic writing are feminist studies of the work of Nobel laureate Nadine Gordimer. Since her life-altering stroke in 2001, Karen has written in the field of medical humanities, though she endeavors to capture, as a privileged stroke survivor who has not lost language, the voices and perceptions of disabled people who may otherwise not be seen or heard. Karen is the author of 2 collections of hybrid prose poems that offer the world from a seated and off-center view. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about your poetry soon. So welcome the 2 of you, and I will hand over to you now.
Thank you, Vivienne. My name is Karen, actually, but I do answer to Karen.
Okay, noted.
Okay, thank you very much. So hello to everyone, greetings to you all. I know that people are here from really all over the world, from Europe, from the USA, from South Africa, and I don't know if anywhere else, so that's really great. So, my dear friend and colleague, Karen, Dr. Karen Lazar, has generously agreed to participate in this series. Thank you so much, Karen. She's going to present her own ideas from the perspective of her personal experience. Unlike most of the presenters in the series so far, who work in the field of disability studies or something related, Karen's professional locations are in literature, literacy, and education. Another difference is that Karen is a poet. Karen and I have a long-standing relationship as colleagues and friends. Carrie, I feel privileged to know you. You are a woman of many parts, a person of courage who contributes in meaningful and valuable ways to the academy, to your circles of family and friends, and to literature, in spite of your disability and the pain you endure. So I'm so happy to have you here and to introduce you as a teacher and academic, and also as a poet. So I first met Karen when we were both teaching in the Department of English Literature at Wits University, Johannesburg, one of the largest universities in South Africa. Karen was young, committed, and passionate. She was a great teacher of literature. She made literary works come alive for all her students and always presented these works from an interesting and relevant perspective. Her PhD, as Viv said, was on Nadine Gordimer, South Africa's Nobel laureate. In her teaching during the apartheid years, in the period before South Africa's liberation in 1994, as well as after, Karen was always concerned with social justice, treating all students fairly and with compassion. She often came to blows with conservative members of the department. I can just remember that, Carrie, who were more concerned with clinging to their colonial pasts. White English-speaking South Africa tried to imagine that they were still in England. And also they were concerned with standards with a capital S. Karen built up, however, a reputation for her humanity, her political engagement, and as an inspiring teacher. Later, we were colleagues in the Wits School of Education, engaged in the training of English teachers, both English mother tongue speakers and those who had an African mother tongue or some other mother tongue. Here, Carrie has once again distinguished herself, and she continues to teach there, as well as in other contexts, such as the legal profession. In recent years, Carrie and I have been connected through our mutual love of poetry, through our involvement in ZAP, the South African Poetry Project, and through Karen's own writings as a poet. I always appreciate Karen's sharp and yet fair insights in our conversations and in her poems, as well as her fine artistry. I'm a great admirer of her first collection, Hemispheres, and her wonderful collection of 2021, Echoes. Excerpts, in other words, a selection of poems from Echoes, have been put up on the website as reading for today, just as recommended reading instead of the usual recommended reading, which is an academic article. Okay, just a couple of words about the structure of our session as Carrie and I have worked it out. The session today has a number of different components. Firstly, Carrie will tell us her story, the story of her stroke, how she became a differently abled person in some ways, and how this has impacted on her life. Then we will read some of Karen's poems, each one of which tells a story or is a small vignette. We thought of 15 to 20 minutes for each of these sections. Then after that, Karen will respond in her own way to the 4 Neuroatypicality series questions. And then finally, as Viv and Candace have said, we'll open up to the floor for comments and questions. Okay, so we have planned to begin with the personal story. So over to you, Carrie.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. And Denise, thank you for those very affirming and wonderful words. And I could not have been through this journey without my esteemed, creative and brilliant teacher and mentor, Denise Newfield. So thank you. So thank you for this opportunity. I had a major right hemisphere stroke in 2001 as a consequence of brain surgery, successful brain surgery. I'm just giving you a little bit of the medical background. A huge benign tumor was successfully removed. And the stroke was a consequence of 10 hours in theater. And up until that point, I was super active and able-bodied until I was 39. And I'm flagging that because some neuroatypical people undergo metamorphosis so that there's a distinct before and after. Others are born into that metamorphosis. So atypicality in any form, I think, has a different inflection when you are able-bodied until you're 39. I'm a dancer by trainer, contemporary dancer. So that's been quite a big loss, but I've had to redefine dance. So I think partly what we're doing here today is redefining achievement, dance. We know where we're going with this. So I was highly active. My students called me the ever-ready bunny. I don't know if the ever-ready bunny is unique to South Africa. You know, it's that running little bunny that advertises batteries. And Denise has sort of hinted at this. I never walked into lectures, I ran. Usually on the way back from the school route with my hair still dripping wet. I remember dripping onto the floor of my lecture theatre. There was a lot of running, not a lot of pausing. So a classic overachiever, even over-abled, if I may play with the word abled. So going from being over-abled to disabled is quite a metamorphosis, as you can imagine. But and so if I may, I'd like to read from my first book, because this vignette is around my professional persona. Is it okay if I do that? It's not long. And this little vignette is called Hemispheres. I have a poem also called Hemispheres in the new book. 300 high school English teachers are assembled in an auditorium for staff training. I'm seated in a chair on a podium in front of them, my first foray back into the working world since the big time out. I'm to teach Shakespearean comedy, itself rich in the incongruities of a varied humanity. It starts well. I'm lecturing confidently as of old, at home in my subject matter. I gather momentum, enjoying the great playwright's splashing of carnivalesque mishap onto the bigger life-affirming canvas of comedy. I'm feeling pretty affirmed myself, a professional again in my own domain. But a sensation of a new kind is rising in me, a bass hum beneath the melody. Something palpable but impalpable is wrong with my relationship with the class. I can't tell if it's a lack or a blockage of some kind, or both. This has never happened before. Excuse me for a moment, please, I say. The teachers are watching me quizzically but sympathetically murmuring amongst themselves. I feel totally naked. The pause secures me the clarity to locate the problem. I have unconsciously been teaching to only one half of the auditorium. The other half has vanished into my alienated left spatial field. I snatch a glance at the room, half expecting to see a barricade down the middle, corresponding with the two hemispheres of my brain. Many people have heard of the man who mistook his wife for a hat. It seems like I'm the woman who mistook her left side for a vacuum. So this is what my therapists mean by compensation. I maneuver my chair from its slightly diagonal position to face the teachers frontally, and the missing half swings back into my compass. I pick up the reins of my thought, grinning like a character from the subplot. The weirdest thing about a stroke is that you lose things you didn't know you had. The faculty that eludes me in this lecture is called proprioception, meaning one's own perception. It's the internal self-regulation system that gives feedback on the relative status of the body's parts. It will be many months, years in fact, before I stop scraping the left-hand wall of the passage or leaving the hot tap dripping. Luckily, this is comedy and not tragedy. Thank you. So I'm letting my hybrid prose poetry do the talking for me. So going back to work professionally was a big part of the recovery process. And in those early days in ICU, how does an intellectual feel? How does a trained academic field undergo a metamorphosis? My terror was of losing language. Who are we without language? And I think that question will await all of us as we get older. And the oddities of language. I lost my second language in the stroke. My second language is actually French. I'm a French major. I was completely fluent until the stroke, and I woke up without it, which possibly suggests that my first and second language were stored in different hemispheres. And I'm ashamed to say, other than French and English, I do not speak another African language. I tried to start learning isiZulu, which is one of our biggest languages recently, and it doesn't seem like I'm able to do that. So I think the main point I was trying to get across here is one loses things one didn't know one has. And I think for our neuroatypical students, often they find it hard to pinpoint what it is they have lost or are losing. We can't always expect that pinpointing or precision, because I think neuroatypical doesn't necessarily like to be pinpointed. It's diffuse. And the only other thing about my story is to highlight what white privilege means in South Africa. Going into a stroke as an educated white privileged Jewish, married at that time woman, and my experience of stroke is in no way representative of the majority of strokes in South Africa. So I have been extremely privileged in my medical team, my resources. My children, Raphael and Julia, have grown up during my stroke, and I'm very fortunate to have seen that. And here we are. Thank you. Denise, you muted.
Thank you, Carrie, for that moving, thought-provoking and candid account. Thank you very much. Now, next in line, we're moving to the poetry, which is something so delightful for me. So Karen's work is at the interface of medical and literary fields. It's also at the interface of poetry and prose. And as well as that, it's at the interface of academic thinking and writing and creativity. Her recent poetry collection, published last year, is called Echoes. And there it is. It has a beautiful cover, and I'm pleased that you're holding that up, Carrie, for everybody to see. As we know, an echo is a reverberating sound, a sound which is repeated, often many times. Karen uses the device of the echo in her poems, as you will soon see or hear, or as you may have noticed if you manage to read the selected poems in advance of today's session. In my view, the now sharp, now tender echoes of the poems get inside your head and sort of force you to confront realities in new ways, to see things in ways that you never thought of before or never saw before, expanding your understanding and your responsiveness. Now, the book, Echoes, is arranged in 3 sections. The first section is called Cranial Echoes, those inside the brain. The second section is called Joburg Echoes, descriptions and responses to scenes around Karen in the city in which she lives, Johannesburg. And then the third section is called Cyber Echoes, about her experiences on or from the internet and technology. Now, how are we going to read the poems? Karen has selected 14 poems, as you see on the recommended reading list, and we will try to read as many of these as we can in the time available. Karen will briefly say what each poem is about at the start, and then we'll alternate with the reading. Karen will read one, and then I'll read the other, and the other person will read the echoes, will be the echoes which appear in each poem. We've allocated about 20 minutes for the poetry reading. Please will the organizers let us know if we are going miles over time, as we do want to leave time for discussion of the 4 neuroatypicality questions and for the audience participants to comment and ask questions at the end. Okay, so Carrie, are you ready to begin reading?
I am, thank you. This is how the book begins. Enter the echo chamber, echo clamber. There once was a team of sprites who explored by day and by night in the crags of Cranium, navigating through the brain terrain, searching for answers.
To questions too big to answer now.
They were sharp-eyed and sure-footed and fearless of peril. Until one day the youngest sprite, the little one, lost her nerve. I can't see, it's dark in here, she whimpered, echoing inside the bony dome. Shine a light on it, you called back.
shine, echo, chamber, clamber, brain, nerve, whimper, echo, light, read, write, fearless.
Read, write, fearless.
Do you want to
The
say
next one
anything
is-
else?
Shall I move on to the next one? Is the tempo okay? Thanks. The next one actually took place in a neuro rehabilitation hospital. Some of the writing is based in hospital because of the context. And this one is called Hands.
I think
And I
that's
think-
mine to read.
It's
Harry?
yours. That's yours.
Hands. And I think this poem shows Carrie's very sharp sense, perception of what's going on around her. Hands. There are so many black hands in hospitals. Smooth ones, calloused ones, sure ones, tremulous others. Always the hands, moving, busy, signing to others, passing small comforts to other hands. A peppermint, a slip of airtime, a tissue, a squeeze.
Moving, busy, signing.
Sometimes they disappear into blue gloves. You watch with interest the wriggle of fingers into tight rubberiness, the smell of determined dexterity, of hygiene. You will never wriggle your own fingers again, so you notice fingers now.
Dexter's hygiene wriggle.
The old man with the mop and the purple-veined fingers grips tighter in surprise when you greet him by name. The other hand releases itself and gestures quietly back. Hello, yes, I see you.
Yes, you.
Some hands are rougher, hurried. Giving the 40th injection of the day mightn't be gentle. You wince, though you've been mysteriously instructed not to. The hands that bring your food tray smack it down in front of you. The meal shudders grayly for a second. No eye contact, no touch, just the job.
Just the job smacking.
Chubby, dimpled hands of the baby visiting the metamorphosis she still knows as her kin. Sticky orange fingerprints on hard white sheets.
Hi, Uncle.
Your quiet hands wrap a cuff around my upper arm in the dead hours of the night. It puffs up, followed by a gallop of blood. You watch and record the pressure on the card. You deftly put your equipment away. You could lead now, apply the cuff to the slumbering mound in the next bed. But no, you linger for a moment, though you are craving sleep and home and the moment when your fingers can unfurl into rest. But no, you linger and place a warm brown hand on my anxious shoulder. Back to sleep now, angel. In a few weeks, you'll be home in your own bed.
Always the hands. The next one is called Butter Song. And I was trying here to capture the phenomenon of synesthesia among neuroatypical people, where the differentiation between the senses is not always clear and how that feels. And this is a morphine-induced state. And quite a number of my friends and family said, Carrie, you were so lucky to get morphine. You must have been more stoned than you can imagine. And actually, it was a horribly dislocating experience. So this clinic is weighted down by smudges. Your senses intermingle. Day oozes into night, into day. Smell is granular. Touch is sour.
Smudges.
Your family is taking it in shifts, warily watching the clock and your drooping face, dreading diagnosis but craving facts.
Day into night, into weary day.
You hear your brother before you see him. He's whistling, improvising, but he'll capture it later. The melody rises and swoops towards you in the stuffy grey lozenge of your cubicle. This tune is the only thing with firm outlines amidst the smudges. Hi, Schnookies, how did you sleep? Dunno. What day is it? How did you sleep? Slept okay, thanks. It's Monday here, it's Monday in Los Angeles. Sorry, it's Tuesday here, it's Monday in Los Angeles. He lives here, he lives there, yet here he is.
Yet here.
The warble dances merrily back into life. It's smooth but definite, the color of new butter. Who knew that sound had a color?
Butter song.
My brother is a composer in Los Angeles, or one of my brothers. So there's this.
Okay, the next one I think is on off.
On off.
21. Which I will read, yeah.
Thank you. And on off is about the neuroatypical phenomenon of disinhibition. And you might have experienced these disinhibited moments among your students. And how does one then mediate that with other students?
On off. Percy is disinhibited, the doctors say. His taboos have vacated. Foul alphabet spews from his tongue. Bitch, bastard, pig, puss, die.
Hate, pain, no.
Rage at being sick yet human. Rage at life the traitor. Frustration green as bile.
Rage, pain, no.
You're thinking expletives too, but not saying them. In the next bed, you shrink at his invective. He hurls a mush of malevolent pumpkin at you at dinner. It lands on your pillow. You can't sleep anyway, can't sleep tonight or any night.
Wake pain, no.
Percy's disinhibited, the doctors say. Miraculous, the human on-off switch works. It needs to. It holds the whole show together.
Hold us ever whole. Hold us ever whole. And this next one is called Santan. And this, in a way, was the most mind-challenging experience I had post-stroke. Phantom. I'm the limb that is and isn't there. My person hearkens after me, pats her trouser thoughtfully or strokes the hollow wrinkle on the sheet. I take on the color of wherever she puts me. Interesting being echo and chameleon in one maneuver.
Hollow hearken.
When she needs me, I show up. I play along. Her doctor chats in our presence about perceptual misapprehension as if we weren't there. The medical students gathered around us nod and condescend, hungry for a display of delusion. My person looks at me for reassurance and company. Nobody but me gives it.
Nobody but me.
Sometimes she heaves the weighty valency of me around from side to side, but shatters into surprise when she tries to stand up on a vacuum and buckles, desolate, into a chair.
Weighty, but gone.
But gone. Will she ever be ready to let me go? Kopana, the woman in the bed next to us, has had a stroke. Her left side has shut down, but she's semi-aware of it. A useless weight that still looks more or less symmetrical, unlike us. She watches us, encourages. Gamely tries to share the new world of a flesh and blood altered beyond the grasp of it.
Gamely grasps beyond.
She offers us a mirror, a small round thing she uses to comb her hair in this disheveled labyrinth of sick heads. My woman, I leaned on the keyboard. My woman is instantly suspicious. Why would anything need to be reflected back to her? She's also whole, isn't she? I watch the empty history of my inhabitants below her belly apprehensively. Avoid the mirror. slip away, but not too far.
Never too far.
Who needs this neural nostalgia more, she or I? Then there's a series of vignettes about the other body parts, some on the brain, but we're looking at a few other organs and also at some feminist questions that arise within the question of neuroatypicality. This is called lung, and I've lost my place. Excuse me. Here we go.
On page 25.
It's yours.
Okay, I'll read that one. Lung. I've never understood why my neighbor, your left arm, can't move. But here I am peacefully inflating and deflating, in, out, in, out. The work of decades, but I never grow bored. Does a tide at sea grow bored?
Soft, soft.
My tiny bronchi wave at you in a soft gust of air. Wisps fly to the apex. The base is panting. My cage of ribs fills out again. The boom of red life through you.
Boom.
The cage is pliable, though the limbs are rigid. Softly I billow alongside stone limbs. How so?
How so stone?
I think I believe in an officer who exempts. Sergeant Right Hemisphere has frozen your arm and your leg, but kept me warm and gusty.
How selective illness is. And this next one is called Sense. And I've encountered some interesting aspects at universities where disabled people are purged of sexuality in other people's minds. And I had a shocking encounter just timelessly this morning. I have a student with severe cerebral palsy. He comes from an impoverished family and he has never received physio in his life. Very talented young man who wants to teach. Anyway, he needs a place in what we call residence. I think what's called dorms in other contexts. He needed a place in residence and there are no male residences on the education campus. So we've been struggling as to how to help this young man find a bed. Anyway, the dean phoned me today and said, look, I've got a bed for Temba. There's one suite in the women's res that is adapted to wheelchair. And I suppose he's not really a threat as a man. So we're going to put him there. So, you know, I'm delighted Temba's going to have a warm bed tonight, but that erasure of sexuality is concerning. Funny thing, paralysis. You feel nothing, but you feel everything. A symphony with the volume down.
Every nothing.
Heat comes at you, pain does. Noise and light scream, in fact. Billions of nerves mumble, going nowhere, buzzing at you.
Heat, pain, buzz.
You feel pleasure, though the world thinks you're no longer really a woman or a man with longings, with a pulse in the groin, a concentric heat, a rippling depth, a moist suppleness.
Yet still.
Meeting another sensation, if they dare to meet yours, this half body, this awkwardness.
This yearning for holes.
This awkward concentric yearning for holes. And the next one is called Gaze, G-A-Z-E, and was prompted by an English professor who shall remain nameless.
Okay. Shall I go?
You go.
Gaze. You don't look like you've had 2 children, he says, running his eyes over your breasts and pelvis. You know this is meant as a compliment. Why then does it feel like a theft?
Theft.
You would not trade your scars, your softer hips, your rosy babies for all the flattering in the world.
Trade.
But then a stroke. You see him again, but only you see.
Only you.
He does not run his eyes over your breasts and pelvis.
A woman impaired is a woman invisible. So we're looking there at both the loss and the gain of not being objectified after such a metamorphosis. We don't have many to go. I want to read a happy one called Dance Partner. The context being, as I mentioned, that I'm trained in contemporary dance. Dance Partner. And for me, this was also about denial. And we face denial of various kinds in the higher education sector. So I'm bringing that. Dance Partner. Morning. You cast slumberous eyes about your room. Nurse the minutes that remain till day.
Here's your day, Kopano.
I settle on a squat, square shape, a wheelchair. Who on earth does that belong to, and what is it doing in your room? As close to the bed as lover and attendant still.
But why?
You hate those wheels. Wish them someplace else. Attendant upon someone else. Yours for life still. No move without it. A dance partner welded to you.
But whose?
But whose? Ah, coffee and work call. No point fighting it.
Surrender into dance welded.
You swing over, earth your good foot down, swivel into its square embrace to start your day, to plant the day.
The dancing wheeling of your day.
You have an ally after all, a partner. After all. And then we're just going to quickly read pronoun and verb. Being the English teachers we are, these are very short. And of course, we're highlighting the role that language plays in constructing neuroatypicality in higher education and elsewhere. So verb and noun, page 34.
Okay. Page 34 is pronoun. Doctor and matron shoulder to shoulder at the foot of your bed, both glued to the keypad of their phones. Doctor hasn't looked at you yet. How's she doing today? He asks matron, who is looking decorously at him now. I'm right here, you say sharply. She indeed. Irritable today, are we? He says, looking far away. I'm right here, you say warily.
Here we all are. And verb. One specialist refers you to another and sends a note of introduction. You read it. Why not? It's your body, your cranium, your possession. She stroked, March 2001, it says. Stroked, a cat, a blank page, an ego, with finger, scalpel, feather, tongue, pen, finger, feather, scalpel, pen. She struck would make more sense, surely. Struck her up, struck out, struck at midnight, struck like lightning. But no, your noun has become a verb.
Karen's noun verb.
Oh, here, the language of medicine has the power to transmute one part of speech into another. Noun into verb, pronoun into nothing. And like their scrolls that pass for handwriting, the doctors understand each other. They have a shorthand for aberration.
Strike back.
So that's the end of the cranial scent section. Are we good to go on just a little bit?
Okay.
Is that okay? So now moving into Joburg echoes, I have lived in Johannesburg for 55 years and suddenly landing in my city at wheeled level, it was an entirely different city, seeing Johannesburg from this position. And this one is called Apex. For a while, I worked in the inner city, which is quite challenging. And this is an honor in honor of a set of other people. apex. Imagine you're the aerial eye suspended over the city.
Look, please, properly, please.
Oh, look, at the top of a very high building in Hillbry, bright carrots and the shimmer of spinach sing alongside deep mint.
Look, please, properly, please.
If you look closely, you'll see that the soil is moist, not dried out by the sun. If you inhale, it's not just the hot, dead smell of cement. There's water and green in the air. So someone is looking after this unexpected little garden, but who?
Water and green.
A man with silver in his hair dragging one withered leg. Dragging one withered leg. He knows the season for planting and the season for trimming. His name is Sipho and William, and he has lived here in his tiny rooftop room for 30 years. 30 tiny years.
Sipho William Ngobeni.
He has seen many spoilt generations who can't pronounce his name, leaving garbage outside their doors in the corridors for his unthanked hand to lug away. Generations of urine and puke to be sluiced off the steps. Generations of politicians with different skins but same dishonor. Immigrants with new needs and red spices crowding into his vigilant domain.
New skins, same dishonor.
Who sees the thousands on the rooftops? Tall citizens with short hopes who keep the city running. What are their names? Who touches their faces? Do they call or gesture to each other from apex to apex, share their meals, their attrition, their beds? Let us remember to remember. Lower down where the cars roar around the cyber chatter, where the money piles up for the very few.
Remember the roof, if only.
If only. Does Sipho eat his wandering tomatoes and shimmering spinach, or just grow them to see something sprout and grow amidst the grey? Job title, maintenance guy. Maintaining his garden is colourful and fragrant at least. Maintaining toilets and violated burglar bars, not so much.
Not so very much at all.
Oh, but look, Sipho is sitting in the high sun with his back against the wall, crunching a carrot and caressing a ready tomato.
Apex people, thank you.
And then only one more from the Joburg section. This is called coffee. And I'm sure many of us will relate to this. This is from the particular village where I live, re-entering my village on wheels. Dee, you read this one.
Okay. Coffee. You scoot into a fragrant shop in the village to buy it. Real grounds, dark roast, not syrupy with newfangled flavors that belong on ice cream, like caramel or French vanilla. You maneuver your wheels watchfully between the breakables, bearing your clumsiness like a mistrusted twin. The crash, the smash, the fall are always a moment away.
Crash, the smash, the fall.
Here comes the village eccentric, says a familiar local intellectual, fingers poised over keyboard. He smiles at you aloofly under his moustache of milky froth. That's rich coming from you, says another, pulling John Lennon glasses down on the bridge of his nose. He has several empty cups, a Banting croissant, and 2 newspapers in front of him.
The smash, the crash, the news.
Yet there is more than one eccentric in this village, and there are worse epithets for difference.
Worse epithets for difference. And then the last section is called Cyber Echoes. There's a long piece on how I met my partner online and how to approach internet dating as a disabled person, which raised something I think very pertinent to higher education, which is the onus of disclosure. Who does it? How is it done? And for whose sake? So I'm putting the disclosure on the table. This is called overconfident. Your disability seems to act as an invitation for many unsolicited confidences about other bodies. You get emails and comments from strangers by email in airport queues about their blood pressure, their kidney complaints. Invasion or fear?
Keep it to yourself, please.
Fellowship of the aberrant body may be. Fellowship of the aberrant body may be. A shared human fragility may be. Could have been me, could have been you.
Fragile any moment now.
One email from a relative stranger says, I've been on crutches for 3 weeks after twisting my ankle, so I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. Nor do you have to, thank you. It's my process. Thank you for your mail. Or another total stranger. My aunt Kapana had an ischemic stroke a few years ago, but she's 100% recovered. Try turmeric. Listen, I know exactly how you feel. Maybe not, but thank you for your mail.
And your turmeric.
And your turmeric. And lastly, very last one is called selfie. And I do smell hypocrisy coming off me at this point because I've had to use social media to promote my book during the pandemic, blah, blah. Selfie. You know the genre, of course. Every moment in your life, a photo opportunity. You know the cappuccino selfie, see them every day. The compulsion to share the minutiae. The perfect swirl of foam on the top. The perfect sandwich that has to be shown to be enjoyed. Organic pastrami peeping coyly over the lettuce.
Exhibition over nutrition.
Who cares? Don't you people ever work? But it's just a bit of fun, they say. Stop being so bloody sanctimonious. Yeah, you're right. The camera never rests, though. Voracious for incessant display.
A life without witness is a life unlived.
Maybe you're selfie avoidant, self-avoidant, because the camera can't lie about your lopsidedness, your scars, the empty sleeve that no lens can fill up. The horror selfie tags along too these days. You next to the truck up, standing on its head, the upended tree, mud and water careening around it, water drops on your ledge. Mr. Trump reposted uninvited, screeching at Korea, beefy orange finger on the button, as if the narcissist needs any more exposure.
Screech and spectacle.
Who doesn't wish to emulate the Korea selfie? Of course you long to muster the blithe self-promotion, the posting of the link to your latest triumph, garnering advice you do not intend to heed, on which version of your pending book cover or office decor you should go with.
Triumph and muster.
And now the health selfie has joined the ranks, the health selfie. The moment-by-moment recording of someone's appendix that nearly burst. Silent slug in its bottle, visually captured for posterity and immediacy. The needle before it enters a vein. The EEG results posted for all to see. What happened to modesty? Curtains drawn around the bed.
Curtains drawn around the bed.
And I included this section on modesty because it relates to however we approach disclosure. What are the boundaries of modesty on our campuses and who regulates them or controls it? So that's all from the book. There's lots else besides, but that's my poetic voice speaking. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you could all hear how truly accomplished and wonderful these poems are. So I hope you managed to get hold of a copy of Echoes and read the remaining poems that we haven't managed to read together today. Thank you so much, Carrie. Okay, so the next section of our presentation is a discussion of the questions for this neuroatypicality series. There are 4 questions, as many of you know. The first one is, what does neuroatypicality mean for higher education? The second one, how might higher education be differently configured from the viewpoint of neuroatypicality? The third one, what does neuroatypicality have to offer higher education politically, ethically, ontologically, and epistemologically? And the fourth one, how might neuroatypicality as an alternative politico-ethico-onto-epistemology intersect with decolonial and post-colonial debates in higher education? Okay, quite a mouthful, but I think there is overlap between them. I think these questions have empowerment, justice, and transformation as their goals and dreams. Now, Karen would like to respond to the questions all together, rather than taking them one by one. She's thought about them carefully, and she wants to respond to them through a set of points that she has thought about in relation to the questions that she feels are really important to the topics raised by these questions. So over to you, Carrie.
Thank you very much. If it's okay, at the risk of setting up the wrong method, I just wanted, that's supposed to be thinking, the dangers of metonymic thinking. I've typed it up because Denise and I are in English where metonymic thinking is frequently discussed. And what we mean by a metonym, as we know, is a kind of metaphor wherein the whole stands in, a part stands in for a whole, something along those. So there's an element of substitution where one category is said to express a set of others. And as a disabled academic, I have been conscious of the dangers of metonymic thinking, especially in a post-colonial or post-apartheid context, because it is as if neuroatypicality and race and gender and sexuality and ability have all been thrown into one basket. And we can understand why these are metonyms for each other. But in my experience, and I'm only speaking as myself, I think the dangers of that sort of metonymic or analogical thinking is one loses the specificity of particular forms of marginality, one flattens the differences. And I think one of the areas where this metonym plays out is with regards to toilets. And I'm pretty sure you've discussed toilets before. We have had a huge battle at our university around wheelchair toilets. For budgetary reasons, the university has now put transgender students and neuroatypical students in the same toilet, right? And there are many complexities there because those are not identical. One could argue that transgender is not a metonym for neuroatypicality and vice versa. Of course, they are both uncomfortable and vulnerable subject positions, but I don't see how they stand in for each other. So I'm wondering about an epistemology of substitution or analogy. Is that helpful? And also, just to remind us, typical students don't have to talk about toilets the whole time. Neuroatypical students are constantly in conversation about their toileting needs. So what are we expecting in intimacy talk around bodies, around sex, around toilets? I think our expectation is very high of neuroatypical people in making them talk about their bodily apertures more often than the typical. And related to that, a theme I'm concerned about is the issue of unwarranted touch I think that neuroatypical people get touched all the time. I'm very aware people are often wheeling me or pushing me or touching me or guiding me. And I would say 98% of the time it is done with love or a desire to help. But I think touch-averse atypicals may find this very difficult. And how do we approach that sensory aversion in our classes and our interactions on campus? So I'm wondering about that. I've got two related points here. I'm very worried about the paradox of the speaking subject, or what I would call the onus of discursive output. I'm sure this has come up before. I was watching a neuroatypical of mine. He's a second language speaker. I'm not 100% sure what his diagnosis is, but he does get extra time in exams. He has had a diagnosis. He had to fill out about 40 pages of administrative forms to get the help he needs. There is this massive onus on discursive output. And this is the very student who finds discursive output difficult or can't speak or write. I don't know about your universities. We can barely get a roll of toilet paper without 40 pages of applications. Can we streamline the onus of discursive output in higher education? I'm very aware of the multiliteracies context in all contemporary universities. To give you an example of the necessity of visual literacy and of the induction of visual literacy, I was at an academic conference 2 weeks ago, pandemic notwithstanding, at the Pius Langer School of Advocacy, where I teach young lawyers. And I'm in a very spacious wheelchair toilet. I'm comfortable. And as I come out, there's a woman pushing a huge man in a huge wheelchair. She was a conference delegate. I think he was also. One of those ghastly, awkward, old-fashioned wheelchairs. Mine's quite streamlined. And she was trying to get this wheelchair into a regular toilet booth, into, you know, the neurotypical booth. And of course, she couldn't do it. I then gestured to her that the booth I had just left was big enough. And it only dawned on me afterwards, she did not have the visual literacy to realize that that wheelchair sign was meant for her. So I think we take those literacies to greatly for granted in higher education. And I'm wondering what we can do to induct more than print literacy among students and staff. Something we're facing in South Africa, the campus where Denise and I work was built during apartheid. And it's got horrible square functional buildings, almost look Soviet style in their architecture, be that as it may. None of the buildings, the original buildings, lend themselves to adaptation for ramps and toilets. So what I'm flagging for us is the balance between the old and the ongoing. So I could not get up to my lecture theatre or the staff room. So being the bolshy little thing I am, I contacted the Dean of Engineering, and she came around to look at this old building. And it was impossible to put in a lift, put in a ramp internally, because I think there has to be a ratio of 12:1 in a height length gradient. Sorry, I'm not expressing this very well. I don't have the spatial vocabulary. So we couldn't put an internal ramp in the building. So they put in a new lift for disabled people that can go between these mezzanines, because we are many layers. Millions of rand spent on in the new lift, which happens to be glass. On the day they break open the champagne, they call me, and I go along to my new lift, excited that I'm going to get a cup of coffee before class, and I cannot open the door on my own. So it's like there's the ex post facto consultation of disabled people. And how do we reconcile old buildings and new needs or new acknowledgements? I think that's quite a difficult balance. And one final point, perhaps that will trigger something for you, is what I call Karen syndrome. Sounds very narcissistic, but it is, I believe, a syndrome in higher education. For a while, our university was getting points for displaying a disabled academic, okay? So there was equity points granted to the university. So every time they needed a disabled academic to show off on a committee, somebody said, call Karen. There was this constant refrain, call Karen, and Karen got schlepped onto various committee meetings as the token disabled academic. And eventually I decided to challenge it. So I went to visit the chairperson of equity and I said, I'm not here because I'm disabled. I'm here because I'm a contributing intellectual. And what I'm raising here for us is perhaps to be cautious of new forms of objectification, or what we are trying so hard to subjectivize neuroatypicality, but sometimes objectification sneaks in the back door through having your token neuroatypical on every committee or on Senate or whatever it is. And I think my own feeling is, can we be more careful? So those are just some of the bullets I've been thinking about. Back to you, Dee, and our hosts.
Okay, so thank you very much, Carrie, for raising a number of points that really are very important for us all to think about. And I think now we've come to the end of our sort of conversation, as it were. And I think we do have some time left. I don't know if it's 15 or 20 minutes for discussion from the floor, comments and questions from any of the participants. So I'm going to hand over now, I think, to Candace and Viv, Nikki, who are going to handle the questions, either those that appear in the Q&A session or on the chat, or sort of, what can I say, orally, if people want to unmute themselves and open their videos and let us see them. So can I hand over to you to handle this part, please?
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. Wow, it was a very different kind of structure, but I am so glad the two of you chose to share in that way. It was lovely, absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for sharing through your poetry and your experiences. Yes, we can definitely move into our question and answer discussion portion. Nikki can help me. We will give each of our attendees the option of joining through video or audio, so you'll get a prompt and you can make the choice if you'd like to come into the webinar in that way now. Excuse me, if not, we invite you to type questions or even comments or responses, what hearing the poetry reading may be produced for you or provoked that you'd like us to voice for you. You've got the Q&A little button, should be at the bottom of a screen. You're welcome to type things there. And so we'll just invite you to go ahead. We can pause for a second as people are moving in to the screen or as they're typing. Maybe one of our panelists wants to get us started if they have a question or a response that they would like to share as we kind of transition right now.
Can I start? Thank you. Thank you, Karen and Denise, for sharing not only your expertise, but also your creativity while using poetry. And it was so nice to see how well you were playing together, because it's not easy being far away from each other or sitting in different rooms and having that echo so well organized like you have been doing. So thank you for that. That's the first thing I really wanted to say. Karen, you were talking about tokenism in the environment of higher education. Do you feel that the publishers of your poetry are not on the same track? I'm very interested in how people who are publishing books are handling your poetry. Do they, because I know some publishers who say, now we have an exotic member of a tribe of the people with disabilities who is writing poetry, and everybody starts to cry and books are sold. And how do you manage to get your work, your poetry on the level you really want to have it as an artist, and not as a poor disabled woman? How do you negotiate, and how? I'm really interested in, because it's already your second volume, so that means that there is more than one. And for a lot of writers, this is very important to have your second book. So how do you navigate and work with these publishers?
May I answer? And apologies that there's no background light. And in Johannesburg, we're still sitting in the dark, which means a cold supper eventually, but here we are. Thank you, Geert, for that question. In fact, I think I have opted to go with fairly marginal presses, not mainstream. I haven't gone with any of the big publishing houses. My first book was published by a very significant press in Cape Town called Mojaji Press, that mainly brings out unpublished work by women. It's got a very creative manifesto. And although my work very much expresses neuroatypicality, it's not just that. There's some very hard-hitting post-apartheid critique in it as well. And I think all publishing houses in South Africa are trying to foreground that. But my more recent book is brought out by a different publisher. And in fact, her main worry was how to categorize my writing. Eventually, we settled on hybrid prose poetry. But here, the response has been, a big difficulty has been promoting and distributing. And of course, the pandemic is largely responsible for that. But another aspect which is implied in what we've been discussing is I've been using the book as a platform for reaching out to different platforms within neuroatypicality. I've spoken at the Stroke Foundation. I've done some advocacy work with a number of organizations who deal with disability, with an organization called Head Start. So it hasn't had the usual trajectory, and I like it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add to that just very quickly, Geert?
Please.
Just to say that I think there really has been a recognition in South Africa of the artistic prowess of these works. And so Karen has had numerous launches which have had to do with poetry and new poetry coming out, rather than with any particular category of disability or something like that. I think it's been recognized in our literary and artistic community here that Karen has produced 2 very fine volumes of literature.
Thank you very much, Denise. But I think Geert's word tokenism is what we need to think about in higher education. Because one could argue without that initial tokenistic impulse, there is no visibility for neuroatypicals. That once it is on the map, it ceases to be tokenistic. But that first gesture is often construed as tokenistic. How do we deal with that?
We have another question in the Q&A, and I see Veronica's got her hand up. So should I just ask the question in the Q&A, and then we'll go to Veronica, if that's okay? This is from Francois, who says, thank you for sharing so generously from your personal experience. It was lovely to hear your poetry, very thought-provoking. You spoke about losing things you never knew you had. Are there perhaps some things that you realize that you have gained? Perhaps generative new perspectives that arose from the metamorphosis you underwent?
Shall I answer, Nikki?
Yeah,
I'll
please.
answer. Francois, thank you very much for that question. Oh, yes, I think the new perspective, I come from a very secular Jewish intellectual family, and the word spiritual didn't get a whole lot of airtime in our family. It was somehow not very welcome. And I think what my stroke has opened me up to is intelligence is bigger than mind. And intelligence is bigger than a neuroatypical mind. So I'm not talking about a deity, but I am talking about a greater bigness, perhaps. And sorry, that was badly put. That really, for an English lecturer, greater bigness has to be retracted. But I think that concept that intelligence is greater than mind and an over-identification with mind, that has been a huge gift. And another aspect of that, in the early days when I was in rehab, a very exhausted and harassed physio said to me, it must have been very hard for you coming round from your op feeling like half a person. This was a woman of 40 years experience. It must have been hard for you feeling like half a person. And I was so speechless that I actually didn't respond. And only later did I absorb that I have never been more whole. W-H-O-L-E. So one has to, did I have to be shut down on one side in order to be whole? I'm not going to get into esoteric arguments, but the questions are there. So Francois, thanks for that. That has been a great gift. And the notion of a gift, because we are asking, what does neuroatypicality have to gift us in a way? And I'm not sure that's its role. But the question of gift comes up often. My daughter Julia was 6 when I had my stroke, and she overheard a well-intentioned person saying to me in a ward full of 40 people, Karen, what's the gift of your stroke? And my sweet little girl said to me, Mom, what does he mean it's a gift? What does that question mean? So, and it's taken her the 21 years of my stroke, I think. She's now 27, to think about that question. What is the gift? And asking what is the gift actually may sound quite exploitative. Francois, I know that's not what you're implying. But yes, there are these gifts. But whose are they? And whose are they to use?
Veronica, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, please. I can't switch on my video, but Karen, thank you. Nikki, can you switch on my video? Because it's not allowing me to.
I can try to do that, Veronica. Let me see if I can help you.
Okay, no problems. If it doesn't go on, no problems. Karen, thank you so much for what you're doing, for all you've been through, for sharing so honestly and generously your journey. I'm a physiotherapist, and I'm not surprised at your challenges, and I really think your work should be a resource for health professionals, not necessarily for people who've had strokes, for head injuries. It should be for health professionals to better understand what the experiences, whether it's about toilets, whether it's about sexual needs, whether it's about living really with in a different way. I think your book, which Denise kindly gifted me, is just so powerful. So I just want to say a big thank you for what you're sharing and your expertise in that sharing.
Thank you very much, Veronica. I would love to get in touch with physios. Obviously, I have my own physio and she's marvelous and she's helped to facilitate the book going out there. But how do we network among health professionals? I think it's part of our education campaign in higher education.
Absolutely, and occupational therapists, all healthcare workers need to hear need to hear from people like you. But again, I hear what you say about the emotional labor of sharing your challenges, and that is important to acknowledge. Thank you.
And I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't find it hard to share. Having lost my second language is a whole lot less serious than if I'd lost my first. So there have also been these gains.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I see we have a question in the Q&A box, and I know we're close to running out of time here shortly. So I'll read that out loud. It says, many thanks for this beautiful sharing and the echoes. The attention to wholeness and the weaving in of many perspectives is much appreciated. One which opens us all up for connection with your facets of connection and experience. I wonder whether we might hear more about the vantage point of Denise as a colleague and how you came to be together with this work. How might the dwelling with poetry or other arts help us learn to see, to hear, to think more expansively? And that was written by Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. Dee, will you answer this one?
Well, in a way, the question has sort of answered it. I can say that having been on this journey with Karen, as a friend, a fellow human being, I have learned so much. It has expanded my mind in a very sort of intimate way, and my being around the question of disability. You know, I think many people, in a way, perhaps they feel a kind of stigma around that, or they're afraid of connecting with people who aren't like themselves. And maybe I had that a little myself as well. But being with Karen, who has been so open, and feeling all the way that I have gained so much from her in a whole range of ways, has really deepened and changed a friendship and a collegiality that we enjoyed in the before as well.
Thanks, and Aaron, thanks for your comment and question. I think that poetry is the tissue that connects Denise and I. And the other tissues, education, our vocation as teacher trainers, those are woven through and around that. So disability is not the primary thing. It is one of several.
Very true.
Anne, I see your hand is raised. Do you want to voice a question or a response?
Lovely. Good evening, everybody from Israel. For us, the evening is falling. Soon have beautiful sunsets. But Karen, this has been the most remarkable experience for me. And I did want to share something very special with you. I'm very conscious of language, and I liked your definition of differently abled. I think it's a beautiful definition, and what I think that the privilege of working, learning, teaching together with people who are differently abled is a gift to the other differently abled like me. who've fortunately avoided most of these problems. But I had personal experience teaching Army veterans Tai Chi for about 20 years. And my granddaughter is the regional director. She's a 17-year-old high schooler of a special youth movement that exists only in Israel that's called Crembo Wings. Crembo is a funny little cookie with mushrooms in it, and I'm sorry, marshmallow in it, and it's covered with chocolate, and the kids love it. And the idea of calling it Crembo Wings was because all the kids love it, and all the kids belong to Crembo, those who are differently abled and those who are more differently abled. And it's a remarkable movement that has everybody together doing everything, including a one-day tour, one in the desert and one in the mountains for kids who had wheelchairs. It took 6 months to organize because of all the extra facilities needed, but it is a remarkable experience. And when my granddaughter was interviewed about it by a group of people from Canada, they asked her why this matters. And she said, firstly, her best friend is the child that she mentored in her first year in this organization 3 years ago. And today they speak daily. Severely, well, she's not limited intellectually at all, but physically, she's very limited. And her twin brother is verbally limited and physically very, very able. So one sort of wonders if there's a cosmic balance here. But my granddaughter's answer to the question was that the main thing that she gained from being in this youth movement was that she learned and how enriching it is to meet other and different people. And I think that that enrichment is what I hope you feel and understand that you're bringing to the university. I fully understand your idea of being the representative differently abled person, the same as I always resented being the representative woman on any board. There's no such thing. We're 50%. There's no such thing as a representative woman. And I don't represent anybody but myself because I'm me and you are you. I can sympathize with that. And I'm very pleased that you did that, because I was blown away by your poetry, which, by the way, I got through Kindle on the spot. I didn't wait for a book to come. As soon as I saw it in the message, I went into Kindle and I bought it. And there it was. And I could read it. And the only problem is I don't know how to share on Kindle, so I can't give it to anybody else except to say to them, go and buy it for yourselves. Really, for $10, it's not a great investment in finances for most of the people who would be interested. Your poetry is very unusual to me. Your combination of prose and poetry is very unusual to me, and I love the idea of the echo. And of course, your cover is brilliant. I don't know who the artist is, but really beautiful, beautiful cover. So I've talked much too much, but I really, really wanted to say thank you to you for, on a personal level, opening a whole new world to me in the experience that you have, the way you handled it, and the allowing me to speak. So for everybody, Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And the artist is Helen Siegel in San Diego. She's a South African American who shared her mosaic with me.
The mosaic is glass.
Yes.
It's a glass mosaic. Beautiful.
Yes, this is a photograph from San Diego. I haven't seen the original.
So we'll need to come to an end. We have a few of our hosts that have other meetings that they need to jump off for today. And we had another question that came in, but we've run out of time. So I'll encourage those who might want to be in touch with Denise or Karen and ask some follow-up. Is it okay if people reach out to you via email?
Absolutely.
All right, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much all that were here today to ask questions, to experience the poetry, and thank you to Denise and Karen for preparing and for sharing so much about yourselves and your relationship with us all. Before we go, I just wanted to remind people of the upcoming webinar, the one that's happening in May, on May 19th. It is, our speaker that day will be Bren Lefrancois, and Bren is at the university. She's a professor at the University of Memorial, let me back up, a university research professor at the Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. And so we'll be so excited to have Bren join us on May 19th. So I encourage you to go to the website, make sure that you find the right time for your time zone so that you can join, and that the unique Zoom link is on the website for that webinar as well. So Viv, Nikki, anything else that you two want to share before we close and say goodbye today?
Just to say thank you so much for a wonderful session. It was very moving.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and I echo what Viv says, and I actually learned so much, and particularly appreciated how you know, for me, what I found very helpful was how you decoded or elaborated on your poems, which I feel very privileged to have had, have experienced that or witnessed that. So thank you.
It's because of all the hospitable faces in front of me. You know, Access has everything to do with hospitality in the field of neuroatypicality.
Maybe that's
Access on its own is not enough.
Well, have a great rest of your day, everyone, wherever you are.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye,
It was
everyone.
wonderful.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.